Let's go to Revelation 3. Jesus is the great physician. Great physician who never lost a case. No one ever came to him and he said, your case is too hard for me. I'm going to have to refer you to someone else, or your case is too hard. There's nothing I can do. Jesus healed all those brought to him physically, but also he is the spiritual great physician. And that's the most valuable physician to have, is the one that can cleanse and heal the soul. Now, if you go to the doctor's going to take your temperature, because the temperature can tell the doctor some things about overall health. The Bible uses that figure of a spiritual temperature in Revelation 3, 15 to 17. There are 7 churches of Asia. That is, there are 7 churches that are in the same geographic region, and they are in the order that the postman would have gone. When he arrived, he would have made a circuit around in the order that we find them. The last place that he comes is Laodicea. In Laodicea, the brethren thought they had a great church. In fact, they were very self-satisfied. You could say, though, that Jesus, the great physician, is giving them a spiritual examination. All the churches. Jesus with a clipboard. So he's going down the list with these churches beginning in chapter 2 through chapter 3. And each one of them, he begins by saying, I know thy works. In fact, in my Bible, I've underlined the word works and drawn lines from one church to the next, and it's in every instance, all 7 times. I know thy works. That's what he's looking for. He's not looking for talk. He's not looking for plans. It's good to communicate. It's good to plan. But ultimately, Jesus is looking for fruit. He's looking for works. What do we accomplish? How many people have we saved? Not how many did we talk about saving. Not how many did we start out, but how many did we convert? How many have stayed faithful? How many people have been helped by the church? Now, in this case, let's read what it says, and then we'll do an analysis of it, and then an application of it. Beginning in Revelation 3:15, I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. As far as we know, Jesus never got sick on earth. The great physician was never sick. I suppose he had childhood illnesses, as all children do, but there's no record of that part of his life. And there's no days missed from his personal ministry because he was homesick in bed that we have a record of. But when Jesus got back to heaven, he got sick. He got nauseous. He said, I feel like throwing up. Well, what made him nauseous? What was the germ that did that to him? His analysis of the church at Laodicea. He said, you're lukewarm, and that makes me sick to my stomach. He said, I wish you were cold or hot. Now, we understand hot. I wish you were on fire for God. But what about cold? Does he want any church to be a cold church? Well, perhaps this is the thinking or the reasoning behind this. If someone is cold, they most likely know where they are. They're away from church. They're away from the Lord. They're not reading their Bible. They're not living right. They're separated from the Lord. They're in the far country. Luke 15, like that prodigal son who came to himself and said, I'm going to go home. He knew he was away from home. His elder brother, though, was at home, and he didn't know how lost he was. Perhaps that's the reason. Because a cold heart can be awakened. But it's hard to reach a lukewarm heart. It's hard to know where we are if we are still attending, if we are still involved to some degree, but not as much as we ought to be. So this Bible class is entitled Taking Our Spiritual Temperature. We're going to try try to ascertain where we are this morning so we can make a decision if we need to, and so we can do a self-examination. So I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. Now, let's see if we can visualize this. Let's put it on a scale. If I had a marker board up here and 3 markers, and I gave you a marker. I said, okay, this is a blue marker. It represents cold. You have a scale 1 to 10. Would you come up here and color what would be represented by cold? I know thy works art neither cold nor hot, but lukewarm. So we have 3 different temperatures. What would you color on 1 to 10? Maybe 1 to 3. Would that be blue? Or I'll give someone else the red marker and say, come up here and color what's represented by hot. Well, you'd start at 10. How far down would you go? Maybe 7 to 10? Would that be about right? So you got blue, 1 to 3. You've got red, 7 to 10. So I give someone else the yellow marker, the orange marker, and say, would you come up here and color lukewarm? Well, that'd probably be about 4 to 7, 4 to 6, somewhere in that range. Now, I have a black marker. And I give it to the first one on the first seat and say, come up here and put a line, a mark where you are on that scale. If, as you walked in the door into coming into the building this morning, if someone had taken your temperature, spiritually speaking, and the notations on the thermometer are from 1 to 10. 1 being cold, 10 being hot. What would the thermometer read? Now, there's no way I would know that. Maybe nobody in this room would know it. But we're able to examine ourselves and make some judgments. So if you had the marker, would you mark a 10 this morning? When you walked in the building, you say, I'm as on fire as I've ever been in my life. I'm a 10. Probably nobody who comes to a Bible class on Sunday would mark anything in the blue. You're here, right? But would it be a 6? Might it be a 5? You see, we need to examine ourselves sometimes so that we can move the needle. That's right.
If we don't strive to stay there, we will not stay there.
That's right.
And I think that's it. Even your prayer life, some days are stronger, some days are not. I mean, that's human nature.
That's right.
We saw that in all the possible.
That's why we're having this class.
Exactly. I mean, there's days where it's not going to be hot, and it's wrong with it.
That's right. Some people picture heaven. Let's say you're a Christian for 50 years. And Jacob's ladder that reached up to heaven. Some people view it as every year is a rung, and you're getting closer to heaven every year. Well, I guess that's one way to look at it. But that's not the way most of us make it to heaven, is it? This equal distance, and we're making progress all the time in the direction of heaven. It's more like climbing a mountain range. And you're climbing up for a while, but then there's a valley. And then you climb it up, and the next peak is a little higher than the former one. So it's more like an up and down. So we are able to adjust our spiritual temperature because God gives us volition. He gives us the ability to choose. And so we can, we're different from the animal kingdom. They don't have introspection ability. They can't look at their lives and make an evaluation. A dog that chases a cat, runs him up a tree, and he doesn't go back to his doghouse and then get to think about that and say, I shouldn't have done that. That was so mean. I'm a bad dog. No, they don't have that ability. But you get mad and say something to the referee at the ball game, and you get home and say, I shouldn't have said that. Why? We have an ability to analyze ourselves. But we also have an ability, now if we wanted to visualize this on a meter, and I'm down a little lower than I want to be, I want the meet. Well, I can impact that. My decisions, my prayer life, my Bible reading, my associations, my attendance, my desire can move that needle. Now, let's consider what pulls the needle down. Let's start in our text. We read 15 and 16, but now let's go to 17. Now, this is the Lord's analysis of the church at Laodicea. He says, because thou sayest. So if you had been visiting this church and you say, what kind of church is this? Oh, this is a great church. He said, we're rich. We're increased with goods. We have need of nothing. You're not going to improve if you don't think you need to improve. If you think you're already there, you're not going to move. That was where this church, their contribution. This is not a scriptural church. Oh, there it is. Okay. Their contribution was hitting budget every week. It was over budget. They were like, we're rich. We got money in the bank. Somebody comes and needs support, we can give it to them if we want to. We could. Plans. That's a good point. They had the eye disease, didn't they? Just like that rich farmer in Luke 12. I've done all this. I'm going to build me a big barn. And thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall these things be? You're going to leave them behind tonight. You're planning for an early retirement. You don't have an early retirement. So that's probably the first. That's the place to start with the Laodiceans is pride. We're rich. We got plenty of goods. We don't need anything. But that was their analysis. What was the Lord's analysis? And knowest not that thou art poor. I got them out of order. That thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. If you had a spectrum, and their analysis of their church would be all the way on one end of it. His analysis of that same church was all the way on the other end of it. We can deceive ourselves by using the wrong standard. They were using the standard of this world. This world measures things by how much it costs, how much money you have, prestige. The Lord doesn't measure us that way. He measures us by the size of our heart. He measures us by the busyness of our hands. He measures us by the devotion of our minds. Those aren't things that are easily measured by bank accounts and square footage. All right, so now let's talk about how to apply this. So the problem with this church seems to have been materialism. We're rich. One of the dangers of being an American citizen in our generation is materialism. If I ask before I started this conversation, do we have any rich people in this church? Don't raise your hand, but would anybody have said, yeah, well, Hey, don't say it yet. I'm getting there. Wait. Don't spoil the punchline on me, Clarence. Here we go. Okay, may I ask some questions? You don't need to answer these out loud, but humor me. Is there any food in the refrigerator at your house? Is there anything in the pantry or the cabinets at your house? This morning when you decided you were getting ready, did you have a choice on what to wear today? Maybe they don't all fit anymore after Christmas, right? But did you have to walk to the building? Did you wake up and your house was uncomfortably cold after the temperature dropped last night? If you wanted to today, I know we have a fellowship meal, but let's imagine if you wanted to on a normal Sunday, say, I don't really feel like cooking. I don't think we'll just go out for lunch. Would you have enough money to do that? When the bills come in at the end of the month, are you concerned? I mean, really? I'm not talking about borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, you know. We got this new bills from, I shouldn't have spent so much of Christmas bills, you know. But normally, is the money there to pay the bills? Pay the electric bill? Yeah, it's there. What percentage of the world's population would you say would have answered yes to all those questions that you just answered yes to? What about in the history of the world? Now I ask the question again. Are there any rich people in this church? You know, probably we were thinking about, when I first used the word rich, the way we normally think about it, 2%. The upper 2%, right? 2 or 3% of everybody, you know, they're rich. It's really the other way around, isn't it? 98% of us are rich. And maybe there's a couple percentage that couldn't answer yes to all those questions. All right, since that's the case, in Deuteronomy 8:10-20, when I'm teaching Deuteronomy right now, and what a wonderful book. It's the second giving of the law applied to settled people, whereas it earlier had been applied to a nomadic people that'd be wandering around for a generation. And Moses, as an old man, gray-headed, about to die, dies at the end of the book. And he's giving these 4 last sermons to these younger people. You know, they were all 20 years old and younger when the wilderness wandering started. And so they've grown up in tents. They've grown up wandering here and there and going to funerals every day. I figured it up one time. I think it was 64 funerals a day for 40 years. For all those 21 and up dying. That'd be a sad time to grow up, wouldn't it? But now it's a happy time because they're finally done with it. You're about to cross over Jordan. You're about to live in houses you didn't build, eat from vineyards you didn't plant, live in cities with walls you didn't construct. So it's going to be a change for them. And they're about to get rich. I was teaching chapter 16 last week, I think. After this, he says, well, there's one, there are 2 verses that seem to be a contradiction. One says, you got to help the poor people, and you always have poor people. And then there's a verse earlier in chapter that says, when you don't have any poor people. I thought, how can that be? And then, well, there's one time in the history of Israel they had no poor people. When they conquered the land and they divided it, how many people got land? All of them. There were no poor people for a little while. But you know how people are. And some of them squandered their blessings and lost it, and they became poor again. But for one, they were all rich. Now, back to Deuteronomy 8:10-20. Moses warned them. He said, when you're in the land and you're, I'll say it this way, fat and sassy, you're blessed, you've got no financial problems, don't forget the Lord. So what's the natural inclination of self-satisfied people? I don't need God. There's nobody in this room that ever say that. But you don't have to say something to act upon it. It's like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Abraham Lincoln said, I have often been driven to my knees by the sincere conviction that there was nowhere else to go. When do you pray harder and more often? When the sun's shining or when it's stormy? When your health is good or when you got a bad report? When somebody you love is prospering, promoted, enjoying life, or when things have gone sideways for them? Yeah, we tend to pray more and with more fervency in the bad times. Good. Let me ask this question. When do you need God more? When things are going well or when things are going bad? Be careful how you answer that, right? It's equal. It's equal. You don't need God anymore when your health is bad, you're poor. You need Him the same. But when do we think we need God more? Yeah. So, I'm going to put a period on this one and go to the next point. But before I do, I'm going to make the application obvious. Since we are rich, we need to stay on guard that we stay hungry for God when we're rich. That we do not become self-satisfied. Number 2. Thinking about the parable of the sower. Sometimes preachers call it the parable of the souls, but Jesus called it the parable of the sower. So let's call it the parable of the sower. But it is about souls. And you have the wayside soul is too hard. So the sermon will be preached here today, last Sunday, next Sunday, and you'll have different people in the audience. Some are faithful Christians, some are unfaithful Christians, some are not Christians at all. And so the same sermon is preached, but it lands in different hearts. And it may very well be that someone will be here today who came because his wife nagged him so much he thought it'd be easier to go than just stay home and deal with it. But he's not interested. He's like, when's this thing going to be? Oh, boy. Did he get anything out of the sermon? No. Here's somebody else. Oh, that's a great sermon. Oh, wow. I enjoyed that so much. But as soon as the amen is said, I got to check the football games. One of my team's going to be in the playoffs or not. Oh, my basketball team. Oh, I got to get to the store. I got to get ready for that report tomorrow. So it soon gets washed away and never thought of again. Somebody else takes the same sermon and it impacts their life forever. It's like, boy, I needed that so much. And then tomorrow is different than it would have been if that sermon had been preached. Now, there is a responsibility that the preacher has in preaching, obviously. Preach the truth, preach it as effectively as he can, make it timely. But once he says it, the responsibility shifts. He's done his part. Now it's my turn. I've got to take what I learned, what I heard, evaluate it, see whether those things are so, then apply it. Do I need that in my life? Most of the time, no. Most things preachers say, most members already knew. We need to be reminded of it. The kids growing up among us need to learn it. The visitors among us need to hear it. But we already knew it. We're already living by it. But most every sermon has something. When I evaluate the preacher students' sermons, like in chapel, I always have a section at the end, good to great. You did well. Here's how you could do better. Every sermon has a good to great. All of us can get something out of every sermon. It's like, well, I'm faithful. I'm growing. But that one verse we read together, I hadn't got there on that one yet. I'm going to work on it. Now, the first one was materialism. Second one is distraction. Because that second soul, third soul, wayside, stony, that's the one that soon washes away and doesn't make any impact at all. Third one, though, is the one that sticks with it. I baptized a young man. I don't know if I would do this again, but I was a young preacher. And we had a college student that showed up. We were the closest church building of any kind to the Jacksonville State University. So they showed up. Looking back on it, if you looked up stony soul, his picture would be there. You know, he was so enthusiastic. I want to. So we had a Bible study that afternoon, baptized him the same day I met him. I never saw him again. I don't know if that was the right way to handle that or not. Probably now I would study with him and study with him again another day that week like that and sort of build up so he had time to consider it. But that's stony soul. That's the one that, was enthusiastic to start with, but it doesn't last very long. Now the choker, the choked one, that's the thorny soul. There will be more Christians lost because of thorn bushes than anything else. Thorn bushes are our biggest problem. Here's the seeds planted. Some of it blows over on the trail beside. That's the wayside. Birds eat that. Never gets in the dirt. Some of it goes over to the edge of the field. There's a rock ledge right under it, but the water's concentrated and it shoots up fast, but it dies because there's nowhere for the roots to go. There's no character there. Others of it goes into fertile soil, but there's competition. There are also thorns growing there. So it begins to grow. It continues to grow. But which grows faster, weeds or crops? Yeah. We had a garden growing up, and thankfully when I got old enough, I decided that was not going to be a part of my life anymore. But my dad loved gardens. He loved big gardens because he had farmhands, my brother and me. So, well, you had to cultivate it. But at a certain point, I don't know if this is normal now that I think about it, but at a certain point we quit hoeing and started picking, And by the end of the summer, the weeds had just grown up and engulfed the plants, and you had to move the weeds to pick the crop. Right? I don't know if you had that experience, but that's the way it was in our garden. That's the way it is in Christians' lives. The weeds grow faster. They're more abundant. You got to always keep hoeing the weeds in your life. What are the weeds? You might want to mark this, so I'll turn over. Now, the parable of the sower is in Matthew 13, so we'll start there. It's also in, I mentioned yesterday, it's in Mark 4 and Luke 8. But Matthew 13, we have something unusual here you don't usually have with a parable, an explanation. Because the disciples are thinking about that. Well, what does this mean, Lord? So he gives them the keys to understanding it. That's in Matthew 13. The parable's in 1 through 9. And then the explanation starts in 10. Why is he speaking parables? But to cut to where I want to see is down in verse. Here then the parable of the sower, verse 18. He that receiveth seeds, verse 22, among the thorns is he that heareth the word. Now here it is. The care of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. Well, we've talked about riches, so let's talk about care of this world. That's a poor man's riches. You know, a rich man is weighted down by his riches. Poor man doesn't have that problem. But the poor man has the equal problem of care of this world. The rich man doesn't worry about paying his bills. The poor man worries about paying his bills. So the cares of this life. I got to get kids picked up from school, and I got to get groceries and fold the clothes in the dryer. I need to clean out the garage, and I've got this big project at work that I got to get done because I'm going to. It's important, and I've got to get this report written before the end of the semester, and I got a test on Tuesday, and. Anybody have a to-do list like that? We all do, right? Urgent things supersede important things in a shallow thinking person. That's all of us, unless we change the narrative. So may I ask it this way? So your to-do list. I'm a to-do list person. I got like 4 of them. And I work to-do list out every day. I enjoy marking those things off. You know, there's a psychological benefit of marking those things off. I thought that was just me, and I asked my students, and they were all nodding. I thought, well, that must be all of us. Okay, may I ask you on your list of things like stuff like I just said, do you ever put read the Bible on there? Probably. Do you put pray? Do you put attend? It's better to use numbers in goals when you can. Attend 4 services at the church this week. Or this week would have been, well, this weekend would have been more. So you can adjust it. Talk to my friend about the gospel. Complete the Bible study that got canceled last week, and I got to follow back up with it. Okay. You got a boss that's screaming for the project. You got a teacher that's going to dock your grade if you don't turn in the report. You got the test that your scholarship is riding on you doing well to keep. You got to pick up the kids at school, because if you don't, somebody's going to bring them home and you're going to feel bad, right? All these things, they're urgent. They have deadlines connected to them. What deadline is connected to read the Bible? What deadline is connected to don't forget to pray? You know, if we're not careful, the urgent things keep jumping over the important things all the time. And my soul shrivels because it's being choked by the cares of this world. So back to that volition we talked about earlier. We can rewrite the narrative. We can move the needle because we can decide things. Yes, I've got urgent things that I have to do, but before I get on Facebook, before I watch the ball game, before I go to bed, whatever it takes, I'm going to do the important things today. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called Atomic Habits. Anybody read that? James Clear. It's a bestseller right now. It's a really interesting book, and it's got a lot of beneficial things in it. But one thing he talks about is how to change your habits. Atomic Habits. And he's got some real practical ways to do that. But I'll just say, I'll summarize it like this. If you're going to change your life, you need to do the evaluation, and then you need to attach it to A goal, a time, and a place. A goal, a time, and a place. So I want to read my Bible more. Well, that's not a good goal. Not a good goal. It's too general. A better goal is I want to read the Bible through in 2023. Now it's concrete. I got 12 months. I got 1,189 chapters to read. I got a lesson to finish in 5 minutes. Here we go. Well, before I leave that, I'll go to the next one. But before I leave that, make it simple. Because vague goals, you don't know if you reach them, you don't get the enjoyment out of it, and it doesn't really benefit you. So make it specific. So here's the way to make Bible reading. You can do this with any of your goals, but Bible reading will serve as a template. There are 1,189 chapters in the Bible. You divide 1,189 by how many days in a year? 365. You know what? That comes out to be a little less than 4. So if I read 4 chapters a day, I will complete the reading of the Bible in a year. Now, you say, I don't know if I have time to do that. You know how the average chapter in the Bible is 26 verses long. It'll take you about 5 minutes to read one chapter. Pulpit Bible reading rate, that is, when somebody gets up and does a scripture reading, they're reading out loud, 200 words a minute. At pulpit rate, you can read the whole Bible through in 70 hours. Whoo, 70 hours. 365 days, 70 hours times 60 minutes divided by 365, 26 minutes, I think. You can do the math. I'm not good at math, but it's less than 30 minutes a day. Okay. Well, how do you get 30 more minutes? You say, I'm busy from the time I get up there. What do you listen to in your car driving to work? So, well, I like sports radio. I listen to ESPN. Okay. You say, I like podcasts. True crime. That's what I do. I love music. I've got it on my radio station. Okay. Nothing wrong with that as long as none of that's unwholesome. Good to great. You know, it's a Bible in your pocket. It'll read to you. Just before you put the car in gear, open your Bible out, find your chapter, hit play, lay it in the seat beside you. The average commute's 30 minutes, there and back. That's an hour a day. You can read the whole Bible through twice in a year just listening to it. But you say, well, I don't get as much out of it listening to it. Okay, well, make time to read it. You know? Get up 30 minutes early. But most of us will get more out of listening to it than not listening to it. So, you know, I can read it and listen to it, but there's an... Okay, so we've got to go to point 3. You can also divide it by verses. There's 31,103 verses in the Bible. You divide that by 365. You come out with... I forgot. I think it's less than 100. So read 100 verses a day. You'll finish it in a year. All right. We got 1 minute. Let me give you a third point. A danger. How to move the needle. Watch for materialism. Watch out for distractions. Number 3, watch out for cold heart. Cooling temperature. Let's make full circle back to where we started. Okay. When I sing, Oh, How I Love Jesus, do I smile? Do I sing out with enthusiasm? Is it from my heart? Or is it just a song I've sung a lot of times before? Is my heart growing cold? Somebody's sick, hurt, had a death in the family? Oh, well, everybody's... Or do I hurt for them? Take the Lord's Supper. We talked about that yesterday. Is it just ho-hum? Check it off the list. Or does my heart hurt for the death of Christ? And does my heart rejoice in the resurrection of Christ? So don't let the heart grow cold. Keep the fires burning. We'll talk more about how to do that in the next two lessons. Thank you for attention this morning. We're dismissed.